the most convincing proof. We're continuing the study about unity, or as the quarterly is entitled, Oneness in Christ.
If you haven't read the lesson yet, you might be asking the question, what is it, the most convincing proof? Or more importantly, what are we trying to prove here? Let's try finding some answers in this week's lesson.
Well, it's not very clear what the message of this particular lesson is, at least for me. There is an editing committee that goes through what the author has prepared and tries to make things more generic or uniform with the traditional styles of the Sabbath school lessons. And sometimes the author's intent can be lost or made not so easy to find in the way things are structured. But we'll try to figure it out.
Since we're talking about unity this whole quarter, you might have already answered the question, what is the most convincing proof? What the lesson claims, though, is that unity, our unity in Christ and our unity as a church is what really testifies for God's majesty and His power to take sin away. But how is this possible and how is this practically possible? First, let's say that it is the cross that brings us together, all of us believers, as one, according to John 11:52, which means that we all have accepted Him as our substitute. And this unites us. Second, Christ worked for the reconciliation of Jew and Gentile, men and women, masters and slave. The fulfillment of His work in our unity, regardless of race and ethnicity and cultural barriers, is what will bring really the convincing proof in our message. So we should ask ourselves, what kind of a message are we delivering to the world if we are lacking understanding or acceptance of ourselves in our churches?
The story about Caiaphas, which is the memory verse and the center of the first part of the lesson, is saying a lot. Because Jesus was creating trouble for the traditional clergy, the high priest thought that it would be good for everyone to cut the trouble, get rid of Jesus so that the unity of everyone else will be preserved. And this is how we normally think. But it's fascinating how this concept turns around and indeed becomes a reality with the death of Jesus, even though this is not what Caiaphas had in mind. The death of Jesus, he thought, will save trouble and preserve unity. But in reality, the death of Jesus became the bridge and the way that reconciles us with God and with each other. This is the foundation of unity. Jesus' death made it all possible. And when we get baptized, this is what we acknowledge. This is what we take part of. It's not our more unique message and mission as a movement. It's the death, it's the cross of Jesus that unites us. We are broken. We are a mess. But through the sacrifice of Jesus, a reconciliation process is possible. Reconciliation with God and reconciliation with each other. This is how unity works. And the manifestation of it is the proof for the entire universe about the character of God.
The lesson gets pure practical when it points our attention to Ephesians chapter 4 and Colossians chapter 3. There is a strong appeal there for us to be what Christ was here on earth when He lived here. And this day-to-day life that we can have can unite us. For example, is my mind set on things above, not on things, earthly things? This can unite us and divide us. Am I concerned of the well-being of other people, or am I mainly preoccupied with my own personal success and my personal achievements? These and many others can help us live together in oneness. However, all of us fall short somewhere and somehow. Then, are we willing to be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave us? People notice that we're different. People notice that we're out of the norm of this world. And they wonder and they ponder, how do we do that? They get curious. And this opens doors for the good news.
If the healing process has started in us, reconciling us, it will manifest in different attitude towards each other. This is how they will know that you are my disciples, Jesus said, if you have love for each other. Love, care, we kind of understand that. But practicality seems much more challenging.
In the recent years, I have found out that people in the church find it more justifying to separate than to unite, if I can compare vaguely with my past experience. For example, you might have a hard time believing in the Trinity of God. So let's separate them. Or probably you have heard that in the Old Testament, people are observing some feasts and holidays, and your church doesn't do that. So let's separate them. Somehow the Spirit of God is lost in all of that. Because I remember the time when we were putting differences aside, and God was able to use us for spreading the gospel. Is this a new phenomenon? No, it isn't. The lesson brings out Romans 14 and 15 as an example where Paul dealt with diversity issues among the believers in the Church of Rome. How wonderful it would be if we can put aside differences of individual consciousness, character, and focus on the salvation first and foremost.
Your church experiences some of the issues that you mentioned, and I'm sure that others will relate. There are also the ordination dispute about women and others, more conservative versus more liberal views. Very challenging, especially when we think that the others are fallen, not faithful. Is it diversity, a healthy one, or is it apostasy? Serious questions. But when I think about the discrepancy between the pious Jews and the newcomer Gentiles, I don't think that they had it any easier than what we do. Can you imagine that? And if God made it work and Christianity exploded, He surely can make it work today as well. Hopefully, we will let Him. Don't take things in our own heads, though.
We lose focus when we turn our heads away from our concern for people's salvation and we focus on our selfish cravings. The lesson ends up with two very similar events in the life of the disciples. Both happened in a quiet upper room, and in both instances, the disciples were together, undisturbed, having the time for themselves. The first one, the Lord's Supper, almost everyone there is wondering how to be more powerful than the other when Jesus becomes a king. They're looking at each other and they're measuring their strengths and weaknesses. In the second event, after the resurrection, the disciples are again together in a quiet upper room, but this time they're praying together and they're looking forward to the same event, the coming of the promised Comforter. It's not a rocket science. It's how we see things. It's the choices that we make on what direction we would like to focus our attention on. And are we full with the mission ahead? Or are we consumed by our personal passions and desires? We make the choice to either stay united no matter what, or to separate. It's that simple.
What is our mission? If we see ourselves as the guardians and protectors of God, things will be one way. But if we proclaim God as the guardian and protector, the reconciliator who can heal our brokenness, things will be very different. The journey continues next week with unity and broken relationships.